How well do you know the Bible or think that you know the Bible? Are you a Christian, or maybe were one time and studied and now left it behind? What I want to suggest is anybody that is carrying the Bible and teaching the Bible, there's something in here that you're not seeing that I can show you. That sounds arrogant, but what I'm going to do is demonstrate this. And I'm also going to describe why we can't see it. And once you hear it, you'll go, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I can see why we can't see it. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. Now, if you're new to my videos, I am not a Christian. I don't believe in supernatural anything. What I believe is that there is a common nested template. Well, there's a common template that all religions and myths are built upon, and I'm working to extract that one common core. Okay, right off the bat, I'm going to suggest that there's a numbering network that is being built in here. These are the kind of things that we could look at today in modernity, and I've read through the Bible quite a bit. I remember being a kid in church and hearing things, and the preacher reading up front and talking about stuff. And one thing that I remember from early on was that there was 3s and 7s all over the place. Here, there it is in the Bible. I just Googled and looked this up. The 3 appears 485 times, 7 463 times, and 40 158 times in the Bible. That's a lot of repeats of the same numbers. To me, it just seemed like there was a pattern of numbers going on that seemed very weird to me. So there was that in the background, and I think a lot of people can see something like that. And that's exactly what this ends up being. There's a grid numbering pattern in the background that will emerge. Why can't we see it? To set this up for our proper mental consumption, we have to understand that we are living in a completely different day and time, and that we have mental biases that we must extract ourselves from in order to understand something different about them. Give me the world's biggest minister that preaches the Bible today, and give me a 15-year-old kid that has Genesis memorized 3,000 years ago, and I'll put that 15-year-old kid up against the preacher all day long. Why? Because that kid he's got it memorized, and the preacher doesn't. So the kid can pull something out of that the preacher can't. What does that even look like? Okay, so I'm just going to make up some examples here of things that just seem so commonplace to us that we don't really think about them. I could sit here and say, well, let's see, on my mountain bike, I've got 16 of these 10mm screws that work at the pivot point for the suspension, and that's what holds it together. And nobody would bat an eye at that. If I have a hobby, this is all the material I need. This is how it's made. These are the adhesives. This is the porosity of this material, requires that I use this kind of adhesive for putting this together as opposed to that kind. All these different things that we learn in life that we just take it for granted. In my life, I worked with electronics, and a lot of it was a lot of design. And I can, describe the difference between 7400 or low power Schottky 7400 series integrated circuits versus 5400 series mil-spec, and the temperature variations and the voltage parameter operations that allow them to operate in a harsher, more tactical environment. I just know that stuff from living a life doing it. It's things that are just so simple. Things like, let's see, I got to get up and I head out 244th Street to get to work. I get on the 405 connector until I get to the I-5, and then I go north on that until I get to such and such exit, and blah, blah. We know all those things by heart. We've done them. We've got them memorized. And back then, they are not living at all like that. They have none of that stuff to concern themselves with. It's pre-technology, and you might have a story memorized. There's no chapters, there's no verses in it. It's just a story that's told from start to finish. And it would be like the book of Genesis or Exodus, Leviticus. You don't read, you don't write. Your mind is sharp. You work with this. Imagine now we get up every day and people are like into media, just totally connected all the time. Imagine it's 3,000 years ago and that is gone, but you have the story and you have the same kind of mind. You would be connecting with that story as your media in a similar way as today. However, it would be so memorized. You would know things about that book of Genesis that nobody else would know unless they also had it memorized. You can't even talk it and make comparisons about those things because they don't know how many times something occurs. Let's take an example. Okay, let's pretend you and I are a couple of kids way back then talking about this, but we've got it memorized. We're just going to put ourselves mentally in that position, and I'm going to be using the computer for my memory. I do not have it memorized. But right off the bat, we're going to talk about something, and I'm going to say, hey, right in the first creation story is where it starts. Seventh day God rested, but right there on the seventh day God finished, and he rested on the seventh day, so God blessed the seventh day. So right there, 7 was said 3 times, and if I'm looking for a 7-3 grid, that looks like a good enough place to start as any. 7 is said 3 times. Okay, what do I do with that? Okay, before I go down this road, let me tell you that it's very branched out. What I want to do is just stick with one branch right here. I want to look for the 3, the 7, and the 40 connection. What I'm going to suggest is that they're taking this 3 and the 7 right here, putting them as the same thing as an analogous term, as an analog on a template, and then they're going to be utilizing verbal techniques to continue to create a larger pool of numbers, but they're going to be doing it in a way that is very visible. We can observe it. Let's go look and see. Remember that we don't truly have this memorized. If we pretend like we have it memorized, something else can emerge in the thinking process that allows us to recognize why it is we really can't see what something this simple really is, simply due to different time. Because now that we've got it written down, we don't have to memorize it anymore. In that act, we lost access to this. Okay, so I just told you, yeah, I think that the 7 and the 3 starts right there on the last day of the 7-day creation when it's said 3 times right there. Now I want to create the 40. So instead of going all over the place, I'm going to just jump where it comes in. And I'm going to see something right here that says 840. That's the first time it shows up. Now I have played with these numbers. I have done everything I can with them. And you know what? I realize they're not compound. This is an 800. And that is a 40. Now, I would look at that and go, I don't see how that turns 7 into 40. It does not point to it at all, does it? No, that's an 800 right there. However, let's do something here. I'm going to look for 800. 800, there are exactly 7 results, and look at where we are. 807, there's an 800 and a 7 pointing to it. There's an 800 and a 15. There's an 800 and a 40. Right there, that 800 and that 40. But you see what they've cleverly done? They've taken a number 800, which actually, you know what? Does that sound like a clue? 800 years old? Yeah, it kind of does to me. So it's an attention getter. Count it out 7 times. They've taken and given it the role of the 7, only whatever number they repeat with it now gets onto that pool. Okay, so I've got my 40. Does that make sense? We have to have this memorized to see it. You cannot see it otherwise. I cannot see it otherwise. You see, the computer is showing us what we can't see on our own. Okay, this might not make any sense yet. It's growing. There's something that is really, really huge. I'm telling you, we're just kind of cracking into it here. So what I have here is I've just gone ahead and listed those. I started off with my 3 and 7, and you see that I've made them red. But what I've done now is taken through this, what I call an analog farm, where the 800s appeared 7 times, and I put every other number that appeared with it right up here. However, I haven't verified them. They've only appeared 1 time. So let's go take a look and see if we can find similar number pointing happening elsewhere. There's a comparison going on. You have to work this out in your head. It's actually very simple. It is not hard. It's a simple mental process, but it's just unfamiliar to us. Just give it a little time and think it through, and you'll see what they're doing. All right, I said I wasn't going to grab all these up, but I just want to show you something else very quickly here. Because we had the 800 and that was a clue, I see that there's a 900 there too, and I'm going to say, well, I wonder if that's a clue. 900 is said exactly 7 times in the same place right here. So what there is part of an analog farm. What they're doing is creating more numbers. Let me gather them. 930. What do we have over here? We've already got 30 on the list, don't we? Okay, again, and it's a scientific choice at some point to go do this. I've gone through these numbers again and again in different ways. If I have the 800 and the 30 and the 900 and the 30 and combine those two, then that is a 800, which is represented by saying it 7 times, pointing to a 30, and 900 represented by being said 7 times, pointing to a 30. Okay, that's about as deep as it gets. So I'm going to confirm it now as read. That's twice that we have something that comes from a 7, and a cluster of 7 that is pointing to that 30. This is how they encode it. This is all they can do. This is a puzzle with the clues in it. You know what? I got to resist the urge to keep doing this and going deeper into that. I said I wasn't going to branch all over. Okay, let's go look where the 7 and the 40 comes in. Do you see what they're doing, though? You go back into the 100 now, and it's the same thing. It's going to show up differently in the, like 19 or 20 times or something like that in Genesis. I don't recall offhand, but right in this one area in the analog farm, it repeats 5 times. And 5 is going to be one of the analogs as well. So all of these 100, 800, 900 are going to be existing with other numbers that if you take those numbers and don't call it a compound number that's real, call it a code that is, because of it's repeating a certain amount of times, that it is now showing up on the list. All right, take a look at some of this though. Some of this is incredibly tight. I'm going to look for how many times 40 itself appears in Genesis. 40 appears exactly 15 times. So we see that we've already got 40 and 15 on the list. We're starting to see ways of repeating and shoring up, not maybe not so much of a template, but more like a scaffolding. What about 3? For first numbers. Exactly 30 times. 30 is on our list. 30 is one of the numbers. So we're going to continue, if you go through here, to find these lineups. Okay, we're sitting there talking and we're remembering, hey, guess what? I remember that where there's another 40. Wasn't there something like in the Sodom story where, if there's 40 righteous, will you destroy it? No, I will not destroy it for 40. Let's go analyze that real quick. Let's take a look at that. And we're talking about that, and we go through and we start thinking about the story, and we realize that when Abraham and God start talking and they go through this righteous routine right here that's repetitive, that we remember that righteous is said 7 times exactly. So in the same way that we just found 800 being said 7 times and 900 being said 7 times and then tying to numbers, here we have righteous being said 7 times. And then it creates a numbering system where it's pointing to other numbers. Each one of them is repetitive. Once the 7 is done, the analog farm still continues on down here, down below. They could have said righteous 12 times perhaps, or something like that. But that's what they're doing. They're repeating this at a certain amount of times, which then means these other numbers, as long as they're repetitive, you see it's almost like an if-then statement. Suppose 40 are found there. For the sake of 40, I will not do it. If 40, then not 40. If 30, not 30. If 20, not 20. If 10, not 10. And the 50 up above, and if we go look at our analog farm, we see that our 40 and the 30 and the 20 and the 10s are there, along with the 7. So we're starting to connect these in bigger ways in our memory. But wait, there's more. I'm going to jump to the flood here, where I see, for in 7 days, there's my 7 again. And it shows up twice down here. There's in 7 days, 4 and 7 days, and after 7 days. So here's another if-then. If-then statement. For in 7 days, I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. So 40 was repeated, as well as 7 is pointing to it. And then down here it's a repeat. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came on the earth. So it was called into being, and then it was manifested. And the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So those doubling up are all of our clues. But we see again, we have our 7 pointing to a 40. We don't need to even confirm that anymore. These are numbers that are going to continue to align with each other. It gets this deep. Nakedness. 5 times. 5 is one of the analogs. And what is nakedness? If we know what 7 and 3 is, that it represents a time in the Garden of Eden where we're naked, unashamed, then we see that 5, nakedness, that fits in a number of different ways, not simply as a number aligning up, but also as an analog that means the same thing. Being naked is a good thing. That means you are not covered by, well, pain, hurt, shame. This is a healing process. Okay, you can see what's going on here is that not only are numbers being used to point to numbers, but then words, specific words, are being repeated a certain amount of times. One of us is going to remember, hey, right when, after the flood, when it's time for God to keep his covenant with Noah, he says covenant exactly 7 times. Oh yeah, okay, put covenant on the list too. So we're continually finding numbers that are deeper than that. At some point, I'm looking at things knowing, well, okay, there's more to it here. I'm going to look up things like, let's see, Sarai, this is the wife of the first called right here. So if I put Sarai in here, I get 17 results. So I begin to suspect 17 should be one of them. What I'm going to do now is start reverse engineering because I have the computer. I want to just look up 17. 17, there we have it. Okay, it comes up 4 times. There's 4 results of it. It has to be called in. It has to be twice at least, I believe. I'm going to come up to the first one here and look at something here. And it says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. Now, all I want is the numbers here, but these are very specific. Okay, what I want to do is take a look at 600. What is that to me? I'll go up here and take a look. "600 appears 3 times. So in the same way that a word being repeated 7 times takes on the nature of the 7, a word being repeated 3 times also takes on the nature of the 3 or the 7. That entire block is beginning to accumulate. These are all going to be analogs that are very carefully being built, and we're being told how they're being built, that are all going to help us interpret this and find a pathway out. Okay, so 600 right there, I'm going to say, well, that's a good number. That's a pointing, I'm going to call that a 3. 3, when the floodwaters came on the earth. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. 600, there we go. That's the one, year of Noah's life. Okay, Noah. What happens if I type Noah? Noah comes up 40 times. Okay, so the 600 right there was said 3 times. Noah is said 40 times. 2nd month. Okay, if I search 2nd, then I come up with 12. So that's a 12. Okay, we're going to go back and look at our collected list again right here and refresh our minds what we have. And you can see right here the 12 came in from the analog farm where there was a 900 and a 12 in the Adam to Noah analog farm. And so if I got 3 coming from the list, 40 Noah's name repeated coming from the list, and 12 times 2nd is said, that each one of those then takes a it's a shifted what is that? Shifted identity. They all become an identity of something different by being repeated that many times in Genesis, but you only know that if it is memorized. Anyway, these 3 then appearing together, and how many? There's 3 of them. On the 17th day, right there, that's what made 17 become one of the analogs. So it's a different technique, but it's always doing the same sort of numbering stuff that you would only know if it was memorized. If I liken it in its most simple way to sending a code like this. This is the absolute most minimal complexity to it. I send a message to you by runner saying, meet me on 7th Street. Hurry up and get to 7th Street. I'll see you when you get to 7th Street. And since I said 7th Street 3 times, you know to meet me on 3rd Street, not 7th. They're not really doing things like that. They're actually saying, oh, I can meet you on 7th and 3rd Street. Both are okay. So that's not the greatest example. But what they're doing is just adding or repeating words the right amount of times to put it on the template in the same place as those other locations. So that 17 becomes a part of it. Now Sarai is that pure state. Now we are gone to the female beginning in the beginning that is now at a pure state, like Adam and Eve would be, or in Job, where there are 3 daughters representing female at that same place. If you can interpret it, that's getting off of the numbers and getting into what the numbers mean, which is another layer altogether. So that's why it is so complicated to see. But watch this now. What I'm going to do is start second guessing the puzzle. I'm going to pull up things like wicked, which I realize are in here, and it should not fit the criteria. It should somehow be something different. And when I do, I pull up 8 results. 8 is what? 1 past 8 is 1 past 7. So if you were looking on the template off of the numbers, if you came off the numbers and went back onto the real life template, you would have Eden, naked, unashamed, conscious, subconscious. We're self-aware, naked, unashamed in the garden. This is when we're running around like little kids buck naked. We don't even care. It doesn't matter. We are shameless. We have not experienced life. Now we begin to experience life and it hurts. That's first sin. Day 7 is past. Day 8 starts. We have wickedness right here. Day 8. Do you see how it's going to start building? I'm going to jump around and just do some fun random things. I'm going to keep popping up the numbers, but I'm going to go into a little bit of the interpretation of them as well. You see what I've done here? Circumcised. 17 results. Didn't we just get 17 results for Sarai? Does this mean that Sarai and circumcised mean the same thing? Okay, this is where it really takes working it out in your mind. Sarai represents your inner self at a pure state, early in the beginning. When Abram and Sarai start and they're put in a land of Canaan where there's a famine, that's going to represent our early self starting in a devoid place. It's Canaan. That's the good place we want to be, but there's nothing there. That's like being in Eden, the Garden of Eden, as Adam and Eve. If we also look at that as analogs, that's our conscious and our subconscious early on in a devoid place. We have not yet experienced life. Same thing when we get down to Abram and Sarai. That's how it's going to represent the pattern on the template. As a healing template, that is how it begins to work. That Sarai represents the inner being the same way Eve represents our inner being before first sin. Sarai's going to eventually what? Pick up some things. That's another story. But right now in the beginning, Sarai represents a pure being. Well, how could circumcision represent the same thing? When does circumcision happen? Day 8. The day after day 7. Circumcision in the physical world represents cutting off the foreskin of the penis. By Jewish tradition, this is done for religious purposes on day 8. And I've got to be careful. The material is incredibly thick and I easily wander into the interpretation of the material itself. This video is supposed to be about just showing the numbering commonalities, but also that there's something going on that is important with the numbering commonalities. Here we see a day 7 that we are establishing as a pure point in life, and then we're creating a bunch of other numbers that are going to represent that same point. So as we start going through stories and repeating names and doing things like that, we can maintain this template sequence very tightly in the background. And that's where the patterns come into play. That's what we're seeing when we're going, there's something weird there. That is it. We just don't quite dig deep enough because of not having it memorized. Let's just grab a few examples of that, and let me try to make sure I keep the video down to that. It gets very deep. The numbering here, what we're seeing, this is a very shallow, this doesn't even describe what the numbering really pattern is used for. You can see, however, that we went from a 7 to a 8 right there. That was like going from pure state to first sin. Then we had wicked showing up 8 times, which means wicked is that like first sin. Wicked then takes on the same sort of a role as first sin being said 8 times. Do you see those linking network of what's going on? Okay, let's look at our numbers right here before we move on and explore a few more. This is what we have accumulated by having repeats happening. And if we go through lineages through here, anytime we're going to find ages that are 700, 600, 500, 400, 300, and live such and such, what they're doing is the exact same thing. Those are analog farms, and they're not compound numbers. Count up how many times the oddball number is said. You'll find that it links it to this pool right here. And then from there, it'll point to something else that now becomes added into it. So this is still going to continue to grow. But right now, let's just grab some of these and look for some repetitions in there. First of all, do you see... Actually, I'm going to stop and add in the 800, 900, righteous and covenant. This should actually grow bigger. Remember, Noah was said 40 times. 600 was said 3 times. This is going to continue to grow into a huge pile. Really a big one. That is why, as the stories go on and they continue to pull from here to repeat things, it's going to sound so different that they're not going to sound alike. It's hard to see what they're doing. So not only is 7, remember how many times was it that 7 was said by itself? Then you come through and find how many times words themselves are repeated, or 3s or something like that many times. The Bible is deeper than we know. We're carrying it, we don't see it. I'm going to suggest that this is maintained all throughout Abrahamic material. Let's jump to Jesus just for a second off the top of your head. How old was Jesus when he wowed the wise men in the temple? He was 12. How old was Jesus when he started his ministry? Book of Luke, 30. How long was Jesus in the desert before he came back to start his ministry? 40 days. How long was he in the tomb before he arose? 3. Start making connections. All right, before exposing more in Genesis, I'm going to show you something really quickly here. I just took the King James Version of the book of Matthew right here. I'm going to take a look at something real quick. Watch if I search for 3 in this document. What we're going to see is evidence of a grid. You're not going to know what the grid's for, but you'll see evidence of it. Okay, let's look for 3. 3 shows up 12 times. Let's look for 7. 7 is used 12 times. How about 12? 12 is used 12 times. Right up front, I've learned to do this just by playing around. All right, David. 17 times. Abraham, 7 times. Solomon, 5 times. All right, I won't remain lingering down there in Matthew. What I wanted to suggest, though, is, and I want people to understand, is that it really appears to me as though this analog farm started early on in the very first creation story with the 7:3 in Genesis, and from there it continues to just go in the background. It is the framework of Abrahamic teaching. I'm going to take a look at something really quickly in Matthew again, wine. I want to see if it's a good thing. It should be. It said 10 to begin with there, but actually there's something not quite right here. If I look through here, I see, there's swine. I don't want that. So I'll put a space in front of wine here to make sure I don't catch that. That gets me down to 5 occurrences. 1, however, is wine bibber, and 1 is wine press. So wine itself appears 3 times by itself. Wine 3 times in Matthew. Does that sound like a good thing? Yeah, it does. It's a way to feel. Wine is an analog that is a new way of feeling. It's a good way to feel. Where was Noah after the flood? He was in his tent, buzzed off wine, naked. Good place to be. Feeling good and uncovered. You were interpreting now. Let me get back to the numbers. All right, I'm back in Genesis now, and I want to just make a comparison. Now that I know what they're doing, I can bounce all over the place. I'm going to ask how many times does wine show up in Genesis. I'm going to check, make sure it doesn't say swine or anything else. There's 12 occurrences, and they are all just wine. So wine shows up 12 times. Is that from our pool? Wine 12 times here, wine 3 times downstream. Do we see something that's just like it's so obvious when you look at it, but it is so invisible when you don't? All right. The true fact of the matter is you could sit here and do this all day long. At some point, you can see the issue definitely is that if you don't have it memorized, you don't know that. Like I talked about early in the video, the things that we do all the time, we just know it. They had the same thing going on there. We think it's magical and mystical, but it's not. It's a simple process. We don't focus on this. We focus on that. This was all they had. They knew it better than we do. You can see it's there, and there are people who say, okay, well, I see it there, but it's an accident, or it's somehow some sort of divine something. It's not explainable. What it is a network that is nesting an inward healing path in a carrier that is a supernatural, outward-looking carrying case, so that the way to interpret it is to turn inward with it, enter the narrow gate, as it were. It's a psychological process, a healing process that is in here. And it becomes very difficult for people to see, to look at, or to want to look at. And so it's very secret there, isn't it? This is just, hey, look what I found. Check it out, guys. See this? This is so big that it's known in the background. You know that it is. Okay, well, and like I said, I didn't even touch the tip of the iceberg here. It just continues on. I've got other videos up on it. It gets very dry and dull if you're not interested in it. There is something in the Bible. Here, look at how it starts working. I'm going to pull up Job right here, and if we take a look at it, and right up front, I see something that looks a little bit different. It doesn't look like righteous or covenant. It is blameless. So I wonder, that sounds familiar. I wonder if that's going to be a pure place. So blameless is said 10 times in the book of Job. Upright. Upright is said 10 times. 7. 7 is said 10 times. This is the book of Job. Let's jump somewhere else. All right, I've got the book of Romans downloaded as well, so let's hit that and see what we come up with. I'm going to start with just a few random ones I know about. I see servant right there up front. I'd like to know what servant is. Servant should be a good thing. That is somebody who, not you being a servant. This is being a servant to what is right. You are serving justice, righteousness, the life of truth and reality. Okay, that is what you are a servant to. Servant. Oops. We have 7 occurrences. So servant's a good thing. What else do we have here? Let me take a look at, how about scriptures here? I see that someplace. Well, they don't have to finish spelling it 7 times. Scripture's good. 7 is there. What do we have? How about gospel? It says 12 times, but there's a few that are added in here we have to get rid of. We got to be careful when we're counting that we're not counting ones that were added into notes. So I'm getting those out. I'll just put an asterisk in there to misspell them. I'll make sure I've got them. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we have it, 10 times for gospel. Now, if I just kept doing that, we would keep coming up with numbers. So at some point you go, how long do you want to make the video showing the same thing over and over again? You can see what's happening. It's just kind of a cracking into it. But I'm going to tell you, it just continues to spread. Somebody in the background knows it. Paul, as he's writing letters, as the Romans are doing this, they are maintaining this template. What does that tell you that they know? Yeah, what does that tell you if they're maintaining this? It is not meant probably for people to see, but you can see that if you look for it, why not? It's there for us. Somebody's got secrets in there that that they still put it in our hands. We carry them for people that can find it. It's there. But now we're so spread out, we can't find it anymore. We can't get together in groups, and we don't have it memorized. You can see as you go through here, just ponder it. You would go, yeah, there's no possible way you could do that if you didn't have the story memorized. There's not even a question about it. Whether people think it's there or not, or it's accidental, or it's divinely inspired, or whatever, it doesn't matter. I can find a template in there that is mentally interactive for self-healing. And it resolves the odd against my brother, making my life better automatically in secret. So I think, okay, well, that's it. I'll end this video then, because it can just continue to do this. You can see what it's doing. And in Genesis, there are many more numbers still to be collected. You would find them downstream. They continue to appear in that repetitive manner. There is a numbering network that this is structured on. I can point those things out to you, but if you don't see what it's for and don't comprehend it for yourself, it'll be just like really impossible. That idea that Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, this is it. You have to understand it on your own. You have to look at it and go, okay, I see something is there. I want to know what it is. I want to know why. And it becomes mentally interactive steps when you interpret it. Held in a carrying case that is not at all mentally interactive, is it? It does something else. We can see that. Okay, I just want to say that in this video. I believe I've found something, but it is demonstrable. What it's for, I guess that's where people have to agree or not agree. You can't deny that the numbers are there and that the pointing is there and the sequences that are there. It's a head scratcher. So then it becomes why? Why is that there? What is it for? All right. Hope the video was fun and interesting, and I'll see you on the next one. Put any comments, or if you want me to cover anything specifically about this, please post a request below, and I'll do that. All right. See you in the next video.